Normally I take a concept or topic and I show you how to do something, how to accomplish something with that specific command. Today is going to be about, hey, I had a unique problem and I wanted to show you what it was and how I solved it. So there isn't going to be a command to learn out of this per se, but it will show you my logic about how I approached and triaged an issue that was presented to me. To give you a little bit of context, what is happening is we are spinning up a version database for IBM's Sterling Order Management System. And this is pretty easy from a DBA perspective, and I've done it quite a few times. There is a set of prerequisites I have to meet before I hand it off to the application folks. So I have to stand up a database that looks a certain size and shape, which means have this database with this name, make sure you have these buffer pools, make sure you have these table spaces, and you have these permissions. Once that's set up, we're going to point the application to it. The application will come in, connect, and start executing commands to create the tables it needs, fill it with the initial data it needs, and to get itself up and running. We've done this quite a few times. The difference here now is we were doing it with Docker containers because this was a POC. It was easier to spin up and test and just tear it down when we were done. And what had happened is the application folks came to me and said, hey, we're getting this strange error. And I decided to take a look at their application logs and went, sure enough, this is DB2. So what's the problem? And that's what we're going to cover today. So why don't we go ahead and shift, and I'll show you the error code I got and how I went about solving this problem. So let's start with what I was presented. The first thing was I actually got a SQL code out of the application logs, and that told me right away that, oh wow, yeah, this really is a DB2. But what's a 1218? I've been doing this for 18, 19 years and I don't recognize that. And then I looked and said, and on top of that, it's a select. Usually when I'm running into errors, it's because of inserts going awry, or there are columns that don't match, or primary keys that have a problem. But I've got an error code on a select? Well, what's that mean? Well, in the past few videos, you've seen me do this trick that from the command line you can easily figure out what's going on with an error code if you change the numeric code into a pre-formatted string of SQL, the error code, and then N. If you do that and you do db2 question mark and that new pre-formatted error code, it'll come back and tell you right away. And this is why I didn't recognize the code. It's telling me that I'm using all my Bufferpool pages. Wait a minute, are you kidding me? I haven't had to deal with this since, I don't know, version 6, 7, 8, and maybe even 9.1. Way back when I was hiking to school uphill both ways in the snow, there was a time that you really had to watch your Bufferpool sizing, and it was an art. It wasn't auto-tuned and it didn't auto-resize. And you would get this every once in a while and have to make adjustments. But with the abilities that came out, I think, in 9.5 or even late in 9.1, you could basically say, hey, have the buffer pool auto size itself, increase if it's needed. And so I went to the error log and said, all right, maybe this is a false lead. What's DB2 telling me? And so I tailed the last 300 lines of the DB2 error log and see, nope, DB2 is saying the exact same thing. And that is, I ran out of Bufferpool pages. Well, that doesn't make sense. So let's start taking a look at the Bufferpool pages. Remember, this is a Virgin database that followed some pretty strict prerequisites for order management, Sterling order management system. I had to have certain buffer pools and certain table spaces and certain authorities, and that's actually all scripted. And so once it's done, it's done. First thing I looked at is, all right, will my buffer pools size themselves properly if needed? And you can go query tables or system tables, but to me it was just easier to do a db2 look. If you use the -l command, it'll pull up details on your buffer pools. Well, sure enough, I created an 8K, 16K, and 32K Bufferpool, and they're all set to automatic. So they should resize. Well, all right, so we're not hitting a cap or a limit. Maybe things aren't mapped properly. That's not uncommon. You know, I hit a table that's supposed to be in a 16K table space, but for some reason it's mapped to a 4. So let's backtrack. I had the name of the table, and I said, okay, what table space is this table supposed to be in? 16K table space. Yep, that looks good. All right, now let me see what buffer pool that table space is mapped to. Well, it's mapped to buffer pool ID of 3. All right, what size is my buffer pool ID of 3? Well, I can look and go, yep, it is a buffer pool of 16K and its page size is correct. So I sat there and was able to go, it's auto resized. And I was able to say I'm hitting the proper table that's going to the proper table space that's going to the proper buffer pools. Let's review real quick. I looked up the error code. We got it from the application. We know what should be the problem. We verified that that's what DB2 thinks the problem is. We went and looked and said, are we auto resizing? Am I hitting a cap? Nope, I'm fine there. And am I using the wrong table to table space to buffer pool? No, everything looks there. And I know this doesn't sound like an exhaustive list of steps, but there's really only so much you can do. I mean, at that point in time, I'm getting angry, going, this is stupid. This shouldn't be happening. We're auto resizing. I haven't had to deal with this since, I don't know, DB2 version 8. What am I going to do? At that point in time, I reached out to a friend after cursing a lot. And in reviewing with my friend, she came back to me and said, you know, everything sounds right. It just sounds like the database isn't using the right buffer pool. You're not mat right, which is what I was thinking. And to be honest, I even checked. But in talking with her, it made me remember something. And that is, this is a Docker image that is spinning up and applying a bunch of pre-configured details from table spaces to buffer pools. And I went, what if it's creating it, but for some reason it's choosing not to use it? So I dug deeper in the error log. Now remember what I did before. I did a tail of the DB2 diag log for the last 300 lines. Boom, saw my error. If I would have maybe queried the diag history, where I could have seen a much larger list, this may have popped up. But sure enough, it says here, the active buffer pool, the inactive buffer pool will be available at the next startup. So it did do what I asked, right? This was for the 8K table space, but it showed up for the 8, the 16, and the 32. In every case, it said, I understand what you want. Yes, I did go create the buffer pool for you. No, you can't have it until after you restart. Therefore, we're going to use the 4K table space. That made sense. So I went back and looked at my Docker image build. This is part of the script that kicks off to make the image to meet the needs of Sterling Order Management System. And you can see I'm creating everything that it wants. We've got everything that it should have, from the proper size buffer pools to the proper size table spaces. Everything's good. But notice what's missing. I have no restart. Earlier in the file, I end up making a bunch of parameter changes around logging. So I actually do a database restart, so it takes effect. But then I roll in and create my buffer pools and table spaces, but I never did that restart. Therefore, the buffer pools never took effect, and it was defaulting to the 4K. Once I added this in and I was able to restart the database, everything worked. No more database problems. And I thought this was a unique situation to show you, because this is a case of it knows what it wants, but it hasn't taken effect yet. Just like when you're dealing with the database or database manager configuration. If you say, show me what your current configuration is, but you do not add the show detail at the end of that command, it will say, this is what I understand you want me to use, but it may or may not be in effect until next reboot. Unfortunately, there was no real way to see that here. Every way that I was checking my data said everything was fine. If it wasn't for brainstorming with a mentor, I wouldn't have thought to go back and look back for this, I should say. Well, that's it. Hopefully you took something out of this. You may not run into the same exact problem I did with Bufferpools, but if you do, at least it gives you a path to resolution. It gives you some steps that you can try to help troubleshoot the problem. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.